Please consider supporting our channel by liking this video and subscribing for more content. Echoes of Change: Unraveling the Russian Revolution and its Impact on Society and Politics. The Russian Revolution refers to a series of events that took place in Russia during the early 20th century, ultimately leading to the overthrow of the Russian monarchy and the establishment of the Soviet Union. The revolution played a pivotal role in shaping the course of Russian and world history. The Russian Revolution can be broadly divided into two main phases: the February Revolution and the October Revolution. 1. February Revolution, 1917. The February Revolution began in Petrograd, now known as St. Petersburg, in February 1917, during World War I. Widespread discontent and dissatisfaction with the autocratic rule of Tsar Nicholas II, as well as the hardships caused by the war, led to protests and demonstrations. The revolution gained momentum, and the troops of the Petrograd garrison eventually joined the protesters. Facing a loss of support, Nicholas II abdicated the throne on March 15, 1917, effectively ending the Romanov dynasty's rule in Russia. 2. October Revolution, 1917. The October Revolution, also known as the Bolshevik Revolution, took place in Petrograd in October 1917, according to the Julian calendar, which was in use in Russia at the time. It corresponds to November 1917 in the Gregorian calendar. Led by the Bolshevik Party, led by Vladimir Lenin, the revolution aimed to overthrow the provisional government that had assumed power after the February Revolution. The Bolsheviks, supported by the Red Guards, stormed the Winter Palace, which served as the seat of the provisional government, and took control of the government institutions. This event marked the beginning of Soviet Russia. After the October Revolution, the Bolsheviks established a new government based on Marxist ideology and began implementing a series of radical reforms. The new government nationalized industry, redistributed land to peasants, and withdrew Russia from World War I through the signing of the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. The Bolsheviks also faced opposition from anti-Bolshevik forces, known as the White Army, leading to a prolonged and bloody civil war that lasted until 1922. Ultimately, the Russian Revolution resulted in the establishment of the Soviet Union in 1922, which became the world's first socialist state. The revolution had far-reaching implications, transforming Russia into a communist state and greatly influencing the course of world history, particularly in the 20th century. The February and October revolutions in Russia had distinct outcomes that shaped the country's political landscape in different ways. Here are the key differences in the outcomes of these two revolutions. Provisional government versus Bolshevik rule. The February Revolution led to the establishment of a provisional government, which consisted of liberal and moderate socialist factions. It aimed to establish a democratic system and carry out political reforms. However, the provisional government faced numerous challenges and was unable to gain broad popular support or effectively address the country's pressing issues. On the other hand, the October Revolution resulted in the Bolshevik Party, led by Vladimir Lenin, seizing power. The Bolsheviks established a socialist government based on Marxist principles and created the Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic, RSFSR. This marked the beginning of the Soviet era, with the Bolsheviks eventually forming the core of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. Continuation of the war. The provisional government, which came to power after the February Revolution, made the decision to continue Russia's involvement in World War I. This decision was widely unpopular among the Russian population, as the war had resulted in significant casualties, food shortages, and overall hardship. In contrast, the Bolsheviks, after seizing power in the October Revolution, were determined to end Russia's participation in the war. In 1918, they signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk with Germany, effectively withdrawing Russia from the war. This move was popular among many Russians who were weary of the conflict. Social and economic policies. The provisional government aimed to implement political reforms, such as establishing civil liberties, freedom of speech, and democratic principles. However, it struggled to address the pressing social and economic issues faced by the country, such as land redistribution and workers' rights. Under Bolshevik rule, the October Revolution brought about radical social and economic changes. The Bolsheviks implemented policies that included the nationalization of industry, the redistribution of land to peasants, and the establishment of workers' control over factories. These measures sought to create a classless society and promote socialist ideals. Civil War. The February Revolution did not immediately lead to a civil war, although it created a power vacuum that allowed various political factions to compete for control. The country became divided, with the Bolsheviks, the provisional government, and anti-Bolshevik forces, known as the Whites, vying for power. The October Revolution, however, triggered a prolonged and bloody civil war that lasted from 1918 to 1922. The Bolsheviks faced opposition from a coalition of anti-Bolshevik forces, including the Whites, who sought to overthrow the new communist government. The civil war resulted in widespread devastation and loss of life but eventually led to the Bolsheviks consolidating their power and establishing the Soviet Union. In summary, the February Revolution led to the establishment of a provisional government but failed to address the country's pressing issues adequately. The October Revolution, on the other hand, brought the Bolsheviks to power, resulting in the establishment of a socialist government and the eventual formation of the Soviet Union. The October Revolution also marked the beginning of a prolonged civil war, which ultimately solidified Bolshevik rule. Here are some additional details about the Russian Revolution. Causes of the revolution. The Russian Revolution was driven by a combination of political, social, and economic factors. Russia was a highly unequal society, with a small aristocratic class controlling much of the land and wealth, while the majority of the population, particularly peasants and industrial workers, faced extreme poverty and exploitation. The autocratic rule of Tsar Nicholas II and his government's mishandling of the country's involvement in World War I further exacerbated these issues, leading to widespread discontent and calls for change. The provisional government and dual power. Following the abdication of Tsar Nicholas II, a provisional government was established, composed mainly of liberal politicians. However, the provisional government faced challenges in consolidating its authority, as it had to contend with the Petrograd Soviet, a council of workers and soldiers' deputies representing the interests of the revolutionary masses. This dual power arrangement created a power struggle and contributed to the revolutionary atmosphere. See Bolshevik Party and Lenin. The Bolshevik Party, led by Vladimir Lenin, played a central role in the October Revolution. The Bolsheviks, a faction of the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party, advocated for a socialist revolution and the establishment of a dictatorship of the proletariat. Lenin's leadership and his ideas, outlined in his famous work The State and Revolution, provided the Bolsheviks with a clear vision and strategy for seizing power. The Civil War and Red versus White. The Russian Revolution sparked a civil war between the Bolshevik Red Army and various anti-Bolshevik forces collectively known as the White Army. The Whites consisted of a diverse range of groups, including monarchists, liberals, socialists, and nationalist factions. The Civil War lasted from 1918 to 1922 and resulted in widespread violence, famine, and devastation. The Red Army, under the leadership of Leon Trotsky, ultimately emerged victorious. War Communism and New Economic Policy, NEP. During the Civil War, the Bolshevik government implemented a policy known as War Communism, which involved the nationalization of industry, requisitioning of grain from peasants, and centralized control of the economy. However, War Communism led to economic collapse and popular discontent. In response, the New Economic Policy, NEP, was introduced in 1921, allowing for some market-oriented reforms, private trade, and a limited return to private ownership. NEP helped stabilize the economy but was later replaced by more centralized planning under Joseph Stalin. Legacy and impact. The Russian Revolution and the subsequent establishment of the Soviet Union had a profound impact on Russia and the world. Internally, the revolution brought about significant social and economic changes, including the collectivization of agriculture, industrialization, and the creation of a planned economy. Externally, the Soviet Union emerged as a major global power, challenging traditional capitalist systems and promoting communist ideology worldwide. The revolution also inspired other revolutionary movements and led to the formation of communist parties in various countries. It's important to note that the Russian Revolution was a complex and multifaceted event, and the details I've provided are a broad overview. There are many more aspects and nuances to explore within the context of this transformative period in history. After the Bolsheviks seized power in the October Revolution, They implemented a series of social and economic changes aimed at transforming Russian society along socialist lines. Here are some key aspects of the policies and reforms introduced by the Bolshevik government. 1. Land redistribution. One of the central policies of the Bolsheviks was the redistribution of land. In December 1917, the Bolshevik government issued the Decree on Land, which abolished private ownership of land and transferred it to the state. Large estates and land holdings were confiscated and redistributed among the peasants, who were the majority of the population. This policy aimed to address the long-standing grievances of the peasantry and establish a more equitable distribution of land. 2. Nationalization of industry. The Bolshevik government embarked on a program of nationalizing industry, aiming to place the means of production under state control. They targeted key industries such as coal, steel, oil, transportation, and banking. Factory owners and capitalists were dispossessed, and their assets were transferred to state control. The state then organized production through central planning, with the goal of meeting the needs of the population and promoting the interests of the working class. 3. Workers' control. The Bolsheviks implemented policies that promoted workers' control over factories and enterprises. Factory committees, composed of elected representatives of the workers, were established to oversee production, manage resources, and ensure workers' rights. These committees were meant to empower workers and give them a say in decision-making processes, promoting a vision of industrial democracy. 4. Labor legislation and workers' rights. The Bolshevik government introduced a range of labor legislation aimed at improving the conditions of the working class. They implemented an 8-hour workday, established minimum wage laws, and provided social benefits such as healthcare, maternity leave, and sick leave. The government also recognized the right to strike and encouraged workers to form trade unions. 5. Education and literacy campaigns. The Bolsheviks placed a strong emphasis on education and launched campaigns to combat illiteracy. They aimed to provide free and accessible education to all, including adults. The government established a network of schools and universities and promoted the spread of literacy through programs such as the liquidation of illiteracy. 6. Women's rights. The Bolsheviks introduced policies aimed at advancing women's rights and gender equality. They granted women the right to vote and hold public office and legalized abortion. The government also promoted women's education and participation in the workforce, encouraging their full integration into society. It's important to note that while these policies aim to bring about significant social and economic changes, their implementation faced challenges and varying degrees of success. The Russian Civil War, economic difficulties, and political opposition presented obstacles to carrying out the envisioned reforms fully. Over time, the Bolshevik government also faced internal debates and shifts in policies as they navigated the challenges of building a socialist society in a war-torn and economically strained country. Help us reach a wider audience by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Your support goes a long way in helping us create more awesome videos.